Chapter 1 Personal Strife. March 1st, 2023 did not begin as a cultural event for me. It began as a phone call. I lost my job that morning. There was no dramatic confrontation, no raised voices, just the quiet, suffocating finality that comes when something you devoted years of your life to suddenly tells you it no longer needs you. I had spent nearly a decade writing about professional wrestling, recaps, analysis, live results, podcasts, opinions, hundreds upon hundreds of pieces of content produced on deadline, under pressure, often for little recognition and even less security. Wrestling had been my world, my identity, my creative outlet. It was also increasingly my cage. When the call ended, I sat there staring at my phone, stunned not just by the loss itself, but by how hollow I felt. I expected anger. I expected devastation. What I felt instead was a deep, unsettling emptiness, like something that had already been draining me had finally finished the job. That night, the world met Scandoval. I remember scrolling through Twitter, now X, almost aimlessly, watching the story unfold in real time. Tom Sandoval and Rachel Leviss, a 7-month affair. Ariana Madix blindsided. The shock rippled through Bravo fandom like an earthquake. Group chats exploded. Think pieces began forming before facts were even clear. Lines were drawn almost immediately. At first, I didn't realize why I couldn't look away. It would be so easy to say I latched onto Vanderpump Rules as a distraction, a coping mechanism to avoid dealing with my own reality. That's partially true, but it's not the whole truth. What really happened was subtle and more uncomfortable. I saw myself in the chaos, not in the betrayal, not in the lies, but in the unraveling. By the time season 10 aired, Tom Sandoval was already being framed as something monstrous, a villain, a narcissist, a punchline. But watching him on screen, particularly in those early episodes, I didn't see a cartoon villain. I saw a man who looked lost, defensive, desperate to feel understood, and increasingly crushed by the feeling that no matter what he said, it would never land the way he intended it. Sandoval had been one of my favorite cast members long before Scandoval, not because he was perfect, he wasn't, but he was expressive, emotional, and deeply invested in the people and projects around him. He cared loudly, sometimes obnoxiously, sometimes selfishly, but it never felt empty. I recognized something in him that I had felt for years. The exhaustion of being misunderstood, the frustration of being labeled in ways that don't align with your eternal reality, the quiet fear that once a narrative sticks, it doesn't matter what you do to correct it. As the backlash intensified, I began to see parallels between his public class and my private one. I had spent years convincing myself that persistence alone would eventually lead to fulfillment, that if I just kept grinding, another article, another podcast episode, another late night editing session, it would all make sense eventually. Instead, I woke up one day realizing I was burnt out, underpaid, and quietly resentful of the very thing that once gave me joy. When I was fired, it forced a reckoning I had been avoiding. Who was I without the identity I had built my life around? Watching Vanderpump Rules during that time didn't just fill hours, it cracked something open. Reality television, especially a show like Vanderpump Rules, is often dismissed as frivolous, but beneath the spectacle is something deeply human. People aging in real time, confronting the consequences of choices they made years earlier, grappling with careers, relationships, and self-worth under unforgiving scrutiny. Sandoval's mental health struggles, which would later be discussed more openly in season 11, hit closer to home than I expected. His admission that the backlash made him suicidal was met with skepticism, dismissal, and even mockery. Many viewers had already decided what he deserved, and empathy felt conditional, if not entirely revoked. I didn't condone what he did. I still don't, but I understood the isolation. I understood the spiral that comes when the ground beneath you collapses and the version of yourself you believed in no longer feels accessible. I understood the shame of disappointing people, of being reduced to your worst moment, of wondering whether redemption is even possible or allowed. At the same time, Ariana's pain was undeniable. Watching her process betrayal while maintaining composure, humor, and ultimately triumph was powerful, but it also complicated something for me. The internet demanded simplicity, hero and villain, right and wrong, justice and punishment. Real life rarely offers that clarity. In my own life, there was no villain, no scandal, just years of quiet compromise catching up to me all at once. Vanderpump Rules, during that crossroads, didn't just give me something to watch, it gave me permission to imagine something different. It made me consider paths I had never allowed myself to explore, writing beyond wrestling, analyzing culture instead of recapping results, letting curiosity replace obligation. For the first time in years, I felt intellectually alive. Scandoval became the lens through which I began to examine not just reality television, but myself, how stories are framed, how audience assign morality, how easily complexity is flattened into outrage. It made me realize that frustration, when ignored, doesn't disappear. It just grows and grows and grows. Sandoval handled his self-doubt in the worst possible way. He made choices that caused real harm, but his unraveling forced me to confront my own. And unlike him, I was given the rare gift of collapse without cameras. That day, March 1st, two things ended, and quietly, something else began.